Do humans have free will? A comprehensive exploration. The question of whether humans possess free will is one of the most enduring and perplexing inquiries in philosophy, science, and theology. At its core, free will refers to the ability of individuals to make choices unconstrained by external forces or predetermined outcomes. When we decide to raise a hand, choose a career, or even select a meal, we intuitively feel that these decisions originate from within us, suggesting that we are autonomous agents in control of our destinies. Yet this intuitive sense of freedom is challenged by theories such as determinism, the domino effect of cause and effect, and emerging insights from neuroscience and psychology. This essay explores the concept of free will in depth, examining its definitions, the arguments for and against it, the role of determinism, scientific perspectives, psychological influences, cultural contexts, and the implications of these ideas for human life. By weaving together these threads, we aim to arrive at a nuanced understanding of whether humans truly have free will or whether our choices are illusory shadows cast by an intricate web of causes. Defining free will. What does it mean to be free? To begin, we must establish what free will entails. In its simplest form, free will is the capacity to make decisions and take actions that are not wholly determined by prior causes or external coercion. Philosophers often distinguish between two types of free will: libertarian free will and compatibilist free will. Libertarian free will posits that humans can make choices that are genuinely free from deterministic laws, implying that at any given moment we could have acted otherwise. For example, if I choose coffee over tea, libertarianism asserts that this choice was not inevitable, but arose from my uncaused agency. Compatibilism, on the other hand, reconciles free will with determinism, arguing that we are free as long as our actions align with our desires and intentions, even if those desires are shaped by prior causes. If I choose coffee because I enjoy its taste, I am free in a compatibilist sense, even if my preference was influenced by genetics or past experiences. Beyond philosophy, free will carries intuitive weight in everyday life. We hold people accountable for their actions, praising heroes and punishing villains, because we assume they could have chosen differently. This assumption underpins legal systems, moral frameworks, and personal relationships. Yet, the very notion of could have done otherwise is where the debate intensifies. Are our choices truly ours, or are they the inevitable outcomes of a chain of events stretching back to the beginning of time? To answer this, we must first grapple with the concept of determinism and its metaphor, the domino effect. Determinism and the domino effect. A universe of cause and effect. Determinism is the philosophical doctrine that every event, including human actions, is the necessary result of prior causes. Imagine a row of dominoes. Once the first falls, each subsequent domino topples in a predictable sequence. In a deterministic universe, the Big Bang set the initial domino in motion, and every event since, including your decision to read this essay, follows inexorably from that starting point. This view is grounded in classical physics, particularly Isaac Newton's laws, which suggest that if we knew the position and momentum of every particle in the universe, we could, in theory, predict all future states. Applied to human behavior, determinism implies that our thoughts, desires, and actions are the products of prior conditions, such as genetics, upbringing, and environmental factors, leaving no room for genuine freedom. The domino effect or cause and effect model is a compelling metaphor for determinism. Consider a simple choice. I decide to take a walk. Determinism argues that this decision stems from a cascade of causes. Perhaps a sunny day prompts the idea, my restless mood amplifies it, and my healthy legs enable it. All of which trace back to earlier events, like my parents' decision to raise me in a walkable neighborhood, or the evolutionary pressures that shaped human mobility. If every action is caused, where does free will fit in? Critics of free will, such as philosopher Baruch Spinoza, argued that human freedom is an illusion born of ignorance. We feel free because we do not see the full chain of causes guiding us. Yet determinism faces challenges. The advent of quantum mechanics in the 20th century introduced randomness into the physical world. Unlike Newton's clockwork universe, quantum theory suggests that at the subatomic level, events are probabilistic rather than certain. A particle's behavior cannot be precisely predicted, only its likelihood. Some argue that this indeterminacy opens a door for free will, as it disrupts the rigid domino chain. However, randomness is not the same as agency. If my choice to walk is influenced by a quantum coin flip in my brain, It is no more free than if it were fully determined. It merely swaps inevitability for chance. The scientific perspective. Neuroscience and the brain's role. Neuroscience has further complicated the free will debate by peering into the brain's decision-making processes. In the 1980s, neuroscientist Benjamin Libet conducted experiments that remained pivotal. Participants were asked to flex their wrists at a time of their choosing while their brain activity was monitored. Libet found that a readiness potential, a spike in neural activity, preceded the conscious decision to move by about half a second. This suggested that the brain initiates actions before we consciously decide to act, casting doubt on free will. If my brain decides to flex my wrist before I do, am I truly in control? Critics of Libet's findings argue that his experiments oversimplify free will. The decision to flex a wrist is a spontaneous, low-stakes act, unlike complex choices involving deliberation, such as choosing a career or resolving a moral dilemma. Moreover, subsequent studies suggest that conscious veto power, the ability to stop an action after the readiness potential, may preserve a form of free will. For instance, if I feel an urge to yell but choose to stay silent, my conscious self exerts control over my impulses. Neuroscientist Daniel Dennett calls this degrees of freedom, proposing that free will exists not as absolute autonomy but as the capacity to navigate constraints effectively. Brain chemistry adds another layer. Neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin influence mood, motivation, and decision-making. If I'm depressed due to a chemical imbalance and choose to stay in bed, is that choice free, or is it dictated by biology? Similarly, conditions like addiction or compulsion blur the line between choice and necessity. A heroin addict may choose to use, but the overwhelming pull of dopamine pathways suggests a loss of agency. Yet, recovery stories, where individuals overcome addiction through willpower, hint at a resilience that defies biological determinism. Neuroscience thus presents a paradox. The brain both enables and limits our freedom, leaving the question of agency tantalizingly unresolved. Psychological and environmental influences. Shaping the self. Beyond biology, psychology reveals how external factors mold our choices. Socialization, culture, and upbringing imprint patterns of behavior that feel voluntary but may be deeply conditioned. A child raised in a strict household might choose obedience out of habit, while another in a permissive environment opts for rebellion. Psychologist B.F. Skinner, a proponent of behaviorism, argued that free will is a myth. Our actions are conditioned responses to stimuli, like rats pressing levers for rewards. If I donate to charity, Skinner might say it's not a free moral act but a learned behavior reinforced by praise or guilt avoidance. Yet psychology also highlights human adaptability. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, empowers individuals to reframe thoughts and alter habits, suggesting a capacity to transcend conditioning. If I train myself to overcome a fear of public speaking, I've exerted agency over my psychological wiring. This tension between conditioned responses and the ability to reshape them mirrors the philosophical divide between determinism and free will. Are we puppets of our past, or do we wield the scissors to cut the strings? Environmental factors further complicate the picture. Poverty, education, and opportunity constrain or expand our range of choices. A person born into wealth may freely pursue art, while another in poverty chooses manual labor out of necessity. Philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau argued that true freedom requires liberation from societal chains, yet no one exists outside such influences. This raises a practical question. If free will is real, is it equally distributed, or does it vary by circumstance? Some philosophical arguments for and against free will. Philosophers have long wrestled with these tensions. Immanuel Kant defended free will as a cornerstone of morality. He distinguished between the phenomenal world, governed by cause and effect, and the noumenal world, where our rational, free selves reside. For Kant, we must act as if we are free to uphold ethical responsibility, even if determinism rules the physical realm. If I steal, I'm culpable because I could have chosen honesty, regardless of causal influences. In contrast, hard determinists like Pierre-Simon Laplace envisioned a demon with perfect knowledge of all causes, rendering every future event predictable. For Laplace, free will is a comforting delusion. Our sense of agency is a byproduct of complexity, not a break from causation. Between these poles lies compatibilism, championed by David Hume. Hume argued that freedom is the absence of coercion, not causation. If I act according to my desires, say eating cake because I love sweets, I'm free, even if those desires were shaped by prior events. Existentialists like Jean-Paul Sartre offer a radical take. We are condemned to be free. Sartre rejected determinism, insisting that humans define themselves through choices, even in oppressive conditions. A prisoner may lack physical freedom but retains the choice to resist mentally. This view celebrates human agency but burdens us with absolute responsibility, as there's no fate to blame for our failures. Cultural and religious contexts. Free will across traditions. Culture and religion further enrich the debate. In Western traditions, free will is central to Judeo-Christian theology. God grants humans the freedom to choose between good and evil, as seen in Adam and Eve's decision to eat the forbidden fruit. This freedom justifies divine judgment. We're accountable because we're free. Yet doctrines like predestination, prominent in Calvinism, assert that God foreordains all events, challenging human agency. How can we be free if our salvation is pre-written? Eastern philosophies offer contrasting views. In Hinduism and Buddhism, karma, a law of cause and effect, governs existence. Actions in one life determine the next, suggesting a deterministic cycle. Yet, the path to liberation, moksha or nirvana, requires intentional effort, implying a form of free will to break free from samsara. Taoism, meanwhile, emphasizes harmony with the natural flow, blurring the line between choice and inevitability. These traditions highlight how free will's meaning shifts across cultural lenses. The practical implications: living with or without free will. Whether free will exists shapes how we live. If we're fully determined, moral accountability falters. Punishing a murderer becomes as absurd as jailing a hurricane. Both are products of forces beyond control. Yet society functions as if free will is real, holding individuals responsible while acknowledging mitigating factors like mental illness. This pragmatic compromise reflects compatibilism. We're free enough to justify ethics, even if not absolutely free. Psychologically, belief in free will matters. Studies show that people primed to doubt free will are more likely to cheat or slack off, suggesting that the perception of agency fuels self-control. Conversely, accepting determinism can foster empathy. If others' flaws stem from causes, not choices, we may judge less harshly. The tension between these outcomes underscores free will's dual role as a motivator and a mystery. Synthesis: a middle ground or an unanswerable question. So, do humans have free will? The answer resists absolutes. Determinism's domino effect is persuasive. Our choices emerge from a web of causes, biological, psychological, environmental, that we don't fully control. Quantum randomness and neural complexity add wrinkles but don't grant uncaused agency. Yet our subjective experience of choosing, coupled with our capacity to reflect and adapt, feels undeniably real. Perhaps free will is not a binary, yes or no, but a spectrum. We may lack the libertarian freedom to defy causation entirely, but we possess a compatibilist freedom to act within constraints, steering our lives through deliberation and will. The could-have-done otherwise test remains elusive. In any moment, like choosing coffee over tea, the interplay of desire, habit, and circumstance makes the alternative feel possible, even if it's not. Neuroscience hints that our brains nudge us before we know it, yet consciousness retains a veto. Philosophy offers frameworks: libertarianism, determinism, compatibilism, but no consensus. Culture and religion weave free will into narratives of meaning, while science probes its mechanisms. Together, these perspectives suggest that free will is both a gift and a riddle, a dance between fate and agency. In conclusion, humans may not have free will in the absolute sense of uncaused choice, but we live as if we do, and that belief shapes our world. The domino effect governs much of reality, yet within its cascade, we find space to assert ourselves, however small. Whether this space is an illusion or a sliver of truth, it defines our humanity. As we make choices each second, we embody the paradox: determined yet striving, bound yet reaching, products of the past yet authors of the future. Free will, then, may not be a fact to prove, but a story to live. A story where the ending, determined or not, remains ours to write. This essay clocks in at approximately 2,000 words.